Good afternoon. We are delighted to have you join us today, and we are also delighted to welcome Dr. Kalisha Waldon to share with us some information about how to support all of our students in a culturally responsive way. And so I am going to turn this over to Dr. Walden. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? I assume so. All right. Welcome to the coffee talk entitled Mind Shift, Remote Learning, and the Culturally Responsive Educator. I would first like to start by thanking the Center for Online and Continuing Education for this opportunity to share with you my combined experience of culturally responsive teaching and online learning. While I may be the one presenting, I look forward to learning from your experience too. And there will be several opportunities to share what you are doing or have done to engage your students online. All right, so let's begin with a little bit about me. I am an educator by choice and by passion. I received my Bachelor's of Science in Elementary Education from Oakwood University. My master's degree is in reading education, K 12, and my PhD is in curriculum and instruction, both from Florida Atlantic University. I have been an educator in the K 20 system for almost 18 years. I started as a third and fourth grade multi grade teacher, which I absolutely loved. From there, I gained experience on the elementary level and middle school levels before moving on to principalship at a private school in Broward County. Today, I am a full time professor and department chair at Palm Beach State College and an adjunct here at FAU within the College of Education, specifically in the Department of Curriculum, Culture, and Educational Inquiry. I also own my own company, Transformation by Design Consulting, where I use my expertise to empower and support educators in the creation of transformative spaces for students to learn and grow. That is done through professional development workshops, designing online courses and curriculum, mentoring and coaching educators. Embedded in my practice as an educator, mentor, and facilitator is the practice of culturally responsive pedagogy. So I am excited about presenting on this topic today. And thanks for joining me as we build our capacity as educators together. There are four components of the presentation today. So by the end of our time together, it is hoped that you will be able to name or identify 2 to 3 strategies that you will implement within your remote learning or online learning courses. So we're going to begin by looking at remote learning and teaching, culturally responsive teaching, characteristics of culturally responsive educators, and then we'll end our discussion with some strategies for remote teaching. All right, remote learning, a new term since COVID-19, but this is where the student and the educator are not necessarily in the same physical space. So it's not our traditional classroom environment. Information or content is relayed through technology, through the use of discussion boards, video conferencing, and online assessments. The coronavirus or COVID 19 was the catalyst for schools, colleges, and universities across the nation and even the world to transition to remote teaching or fully online learning. This has absolutely changed the way that we do business in the field of education. Some of us were ready for this transition, and others of us had no clue where to begin. What we do know now, months later, is that success in teaching remotely is dependent upon four things: time, communication, technology, and lesson design. So, as we continue remote instruction for the immediate future, it is important that we shift our thinking a bit. We need to shift our thinking in order to center our students. This intentional centering is to ensure that we are being responsive to our students' needs, whether It's their experiences, their diverse ways of knowing. And this intentional centering will also assist us in choosing effective instructional practices, methods, or even materials, curriculum materials to use in our classes. So let's go a little bit deeper and really define what culturally responsive teaching is. Well, according to Geneva Gay, who is one of the leading scholars in culturally responsive teaching, culturally responsive teaching is using the cultural characteristics, experiences, and perspectives of ethnically diverse students as conduits for teaching them more effectively. And those cultural characteristics could include values, traditions, language. It can also extend to include concepts such as the diverse ways in which our students communicate, their learning styles, and their um, relationship norms or expectations. Culturally responsive teaching, in essence, teaches to and through the strengths of our students. It acknowledges the legitimacy of their backgrounds as worthy content to be taught in the formal curriculum. Culturally responsive teaching uses a variety of instructional strategies that are connected to different learning styles and is connected to the diverse knowledge that our students bring to the learning environment. So let's go a little bit deeper to look at some of the characteristics of culturally responsive educators. Rhodes and Smith say or discuss that culturally responsive teaching is basically an asset pedagogy. It's designed to increase motivation by replacing what we know as mainstream teaching practices and ensuring that what we do for our students, those things are grounded in their experiences and ways of knowing. So here are some characteristics of culturally responsive educators. Number one, they are teachers who are empathetic and caring. And caring is not used as a synonym for nice or kind. Caring in the literature is basically talking about teachers who are unwilling to accept underachievement from their students. They create spaces to intentionally relate to their students, and often they put themselves in the shoes of their students and try to imagine the learning experience or the classroom through the lens of their students' perspectives. Culturally responsive educators are teachers who are reflective. They think about their beliefs, they think about their biases, they question them. They question their preconceived notions of what they know about people who are different from them, whether those beliefs or preconceived notions are conscious or unconscious. Color blindness does not exist with these teachers because they really want to be able to show up for their students and to be able to relate the content that they're teaching to the experiences and lives and futures of their students. Culturally responsive educators are also teachers who consider the whole student when they're planning instruction, when they're planning the curriculum or making those types of decisions. They want to make sure that their teaching practices are inclusive. Their content is not only driven by the standards or the learning outcomes of the course, but that content is also driven by students' cultural and lived experiences. These educators seek out multiple or authentic approaches to assessing students to make sure that students have mastered the content or their learning outcomes. All right, so Woloski and Ginsburg developed a comprehensive model of culturally responsive teaching um, that goes across disciplines and cultures to engage learners while also respecting our students' cultural integrity. This model or framework is built on intrinsic motivation. So they name four motivational conditions that the teacher and the students must continuously create or enhance in order for our classrooms to be spaces where students are engaged and motivated to learn. So that first motivation is establishing inclusion. And this focuses on creating a learning atmosphere in which learners and instructors feel respected by and connected to one another. The second one is developing attitude. This focuses on creating a favorable disposition toward the learning experience through personal relevance and choice. So, how can you create classrooms where your students' attitudes are positive towards the learning experience? What they purport is it's through um, the making your content personable, excuse me, and relevant to students and allowing them to have voice and choice in the class. The third one is enhancing meaning. This focuses on creating challenging, thoughtful learning experiences that includes learners' perspectives and their values as well. And then the last motivation is engendering competence. And this focuses on creating and understanding that learners are effective in learning something they value. So, allowing there to be a variety of ways to assess students or multiple approaches to assessment. So now we would talk about some specific ways we can establish these motivations in our remote or online classes. And I'm going to draw on a few examples that Rhodes and Smith provided in their article on culturally responsive teaching in an online classroom, as well as some of my personal examples in some classes that I taught here at FAU. So in the chat, you should see a link to a Padlet where I want to hear also what you are doing or have already established in your classes. All right, so let's start with the first column. All right, the first column, establishing inclusion. And in order to add your thoughts, you're just going to click a plus sign under establishing inclusion. And I want you to share how you have created an atmosphere in your remote or online classes where students and you, as the instructor, feel respected and connected. All right. So, some guiding questions that can help you. How do I learn about my students and what they feel is important about the learning experience? How do I encourage my students to connect with their classmates? All right. I see we do an introductory activity in which students talk. All right. Students are able to ask questions. They can share their screens to show their math steps. Awesome. All right. Providing a diverse set of materials for them to be able to use inside the course, open the floor up for questions. Yeah, I don't think that that's weak. I think that that's important to developing them into critical thinkers. All right. Asking students what their views are, connecting the classmates through online introductions and discussion boards. Those are all great ways to definitely establish inclusion in the classroom. So we're going to move on from here, provide you with some more examples. So with, I think someone mentioned the introduction discussion board. Those are all good. I think that they should be done by students and the professor. They could be videos, podcasts, blogs, etc. But I think that in a culture responsive classroom, you must be intentional about the questions you ask students to respond to in these introductory discussions. You want to encourage them to make connections between their colleagues or peers by reading and responding to each other's discussion board posts, etc. Rhodes and Smith also suggest that you ask specific questions about students' cultural identities and backgrounds, and also provide some examples. This can help them feel comfortable in sharing their own information. To set a culturally responsive tone, instructors may decide to share their own backgrounds in their introductions as well. So when I do these introductory discussion boards, I make sure that I respond to each student's post as well as look for connections or help them make connections across the discussion board. So I would say, hey, Sarah, did you check out John's post? He's also from New Jersey. Maybe there's something that you guys can chat over. Like I try to intentionally help them make those connections because that will be beneficial in situations where they have to work in groups or try to seek out someone that they want to work with as a partner, etc. You can also do icebreakers such as scavenger hunts. I've done that in my class before using Flipgrid, Another cool idea was a personality inventory because unlike some instructors or professors, they don't think that group work should be done online. I believe the total opposite. I believe that online classes and remote classes, there are perfect opportunities for um, group activity. So the personality inventory, I would allow them to take and post their results. And then they begin to see who they share with. They learn about other students that are different from them. And if they happen to end up in a group together, what are some strategies they can use to be able to work better with that person? Right. So that's one idea as well. Surveys at various points during the semester. When COVID-19 first happened, I sent out a survey to my students. I wanted to know what access they had to technology. I wanted to know what type of stressors they were dealing with, what times of the day was better for me to connect with them. I just really wanted to do that check-in with them, and a survey was a perfect opportunity to do that. At Palm Beach State, we had the option at some point to do remote or if we wanted to transition fully online. Well, from that survey, I learned that none of my students wanted me to do fully online. They wanted me to have the remote live sessions. They wanted to be able to connect with their peers and have that time away to be able to focus on class content and not have to do it strictly online by themselves. Virtual hours are important to establishing that inclusion or even check ins, having a communication plan. So maybe I'm going to check in with all of my students who may have anything less than a C. I want to see what's going on. How can I support them? Um, what do they not understand about what's being taught? Is it just a time issue? I want to know that. So those check-ins on a weekly basis, even if it's just 5 students I'm reaching out to, really makes a difference, especially during this time where our students are faced with so many different challenges. Maybe next week I'm going to check in with my students who have A's and B's, and I'm going to send them a kudo email. Kudos, I noticed that you're doing a great job in this course. Continue, keep up the good work, right? We want to make sure we treat all of our students equitably, and also point out things in the course where there may be some behaviors or practices that may discriminate, whether it's a class policy, etc. It's important to in establishing inclusion in your remote classrooms that you have rules of engagement. So this slide shows what my rules of engagement are for my remote class. And these are rules that I explicitly review at the beginning of the semester and remind them as the semester continues. So the first one is be prepared. Like in order for students to show up and be engaged, they must come prepared. The goal of the class is for them to in a collaborative manner, co-construct knowledge with me. And this cannot be done if I'm doing all the talking. So from the get-go, I let the students know that they must commit to doing the readings and the homework assignments in preparation for class. Sometimes I even provide them with note catchers for them to come to class with. On those note catchers, they take notes of what they've learned. They write down questions that they still may have from the readings, and they even write down something that may have surprised them or that was interesting to them that they learned. Active participation is my second rule, and this can only happen if students are prepared. Active participation is a requirement in my course because it serves as a way for me to formatively assess them, because I want instruction to be centered around activities that help them to connect and deepen what they are already learning in the course. In most of my courses, we talk about controversial topics. So, one of my rules of engagement is that there will be equity of voice. The perspectives and voices of students matter. No one person will dominate the discussion, no one person will ask questions. And this promotes a sense of belonging in the classroom for my students. Students are encouraged to be open to difference, also because the inclusion of multiple perspectives and voices is key. We may not agree on everything, um, because we are all shaped by different experiences and come to every learning situation with something different. However, our classrooms are microcosms of the world. They are perfect places for our students to learn and grow from each other. So that's why I have this as one of my rules of engagement, that they must be open to difference. All right, let's go back to the Padlet and let's move on to the second column, developing attitude. Please write down how you create positive attitudes, help students develop positive attitudes towards learning in your class. Here are some questions that Rhodes and Smith asked us to consider. How do I encourage students to communicate with each other and with me on a deep and meaningful level? How do I incorporate materials and resources that represent the diverse backgrounds of my students? All right. So I see point out when comments made were particularly thoughtful, active engagement through video share, personal positive perspective, sharing my ideas and thoughts, encouraging others, spend the term working on specific projects, and students relate to that, making sure that the assignments are transparent, great, making sure they know what those expectations are, using their interests in the topics that are discussed, explain the purpose of the course and the why. Yes, the why to the learning materials. That's awesome. Oh, great. I make myself as vulnerable as they are expected to be. That's awesome. All right. Ask them to generate their own examples. Great exploration in math, modeling that positive talk, working together on group projects. Humor. Yes, humor. That works towards developing a positive attitude as well. So let's go back to our PowerPoint deck. All right. So in developing an attitude, a positive attitude, we need to connect our course content with our students' real world experiences, getting their feedback and perspectives, letting them decide on topics that they want to discuss that's connected to the course content, being able to supplement the curriculum with materials that reflects their diverse identities, providing opportunities for them to collaborate, peer teaching, having clear goals and clear objectives. And this can be done through learning contracts. Whenever I have group projects in my courses, I have a learning contract. And each of the groups decide these are the negotiables, these are things that are non negotiable. If you don't stick to the non negotiables, these are the actions that will take place. And that holds the members of the group accountable, and allows each group member to know what their roles and responsibilities would be with that particular project. And then making sure that there is student choice in the content and the assessments that are there. So here's an example from my EDF 2085 course. All right, so the content for this particular week was focused on religion, language, diversity, and disability ability status. Besides the chapter readings, the students had supplementary videos that they had to watch. Now, this was not a traditional discussion board in that they responded to a question that was based on the reading and then they responded to their peers. Students had choice in which diversity matter that they wanted to do or to explore. Typically, when this happens, students choose a topic that they could relate to, which provides for rich discussions and also a glimpse into someone else's perspective. A part of this assignment, they had to find two more supplemental resources or articles on that diversity matter that was outside of the course. There were three guiding questions that were provided, and they had to use those guiding questions to create a 2-minute video. They were supposed to use those readings and those articles to support their responses. Once their video was created, then they had to post their video, watch another peer's video on a topic that was different from theirs, and then think about how schools can be disempowering and empowering for students. Like there were a lot of pieces to this assignment. Um, so, what do you think, based on what we've learned about developing attitude, what did this assignment address in terms of that particular motivator? It addressed connecting assignments to their experiences because they were able to choose a diversity matter that they related to. There were clear goals and objectives for the assignment, step by step. You do this, you do this, you do that. Um, you had to use APA format. You had to record your vlog. You had to upload that vlog to YouTube, embed your link to the vlog inside the blog assignment, when they had to submit it and when they had to respond. Um, they were able to supplement the content with diverse ways of knowing, and then there was collaboration through the students' responses to each other's video discussions. Right? Okay, let's go back to our Padlet. And how do you enhance meaning for your students in the classroom? How do you create challenging and thoughtful learning experiences that include their perspectives and values? So, some questions that you might ask is, how do I incorporate a variety of learning activities and instructional practices? How do I integrate practical applications into learning activities? How do I require students to examine the curriculum from multiple perspectives? All right. I try to get them to make connections among the various topics that come up, ask them to connect it to the current work or environment, real world projects, awesome, at different points of the semester with some academic service learning opportunities. That's great. Try to reflect on assignments that have been completed. Okay, this way I am able to share my perspective and share what I've learned from their assignments as well. That's an awesome thing to be able to do in a remote learning classroom or online, when they're able to see how you have conceptualized what they conceptualized through the assignment, those big ideas, and even those points where there are things that they need to reconsider moving forward. All right, having virtual guest speakers to target populations, linking to real world or current events. All right, having students create personal learning objectives and goals and checking in with them. That's all great. All right. So it's important to be able to provide challenging learning experiences and including higher order thinking and problem solving. It's important for us to involve those multiple perspectives or integrate those multiple perspectives. So even if it is inviting people from different cultural groups to be able to come as guest speakers, excuse me, that is one way that that can be done, because the textbook perspective is only one perspective. And if we know anything about how textbooks are created, we know that decisions are made about what's included and what will be omitted. And what's typically left out, unfortunately, are the contributions or knowledge of diverse groups of people that have impacted that theory or that concept under study. We know that our textbooks can have inaccuracies and bias. And in one sense, bias isn't a problem because no one is neutral, and every scholar, every teacher has a particular perspective on a subject. However, the problem comes when students are unaware of that bias. So we should intentionally implement or incorporate a variety of resources from a variety of viewpoints so that our students can then be critical thinkers and can co-construct knowledge for themselves. And these opportunities to address real world issues and be action oriented, they're all perfect opportunities for them to be able to make sense of what they're learning, and making sense of what they're learning through the use of diverse instructional activities such as think, pair, shares, video-based discussions, simulations, case studies, etc. So here's an example from my EDG 5705 course. The students were provided with case studies, and in groups, they were to analyze the case using Gorski and Pathini's framework. Sometimes when I divide students into groups, it's based on what I know about them, based on their strengths, etc. And other times I allow them to select their own groups based on a topic that they want to explore deeper. So for this assignment, there were 4 case study groups. Each group collaborated using Google Docs. They identified the problem, the perspectives, the challenges, the opportunities, the equitable outcomes, the short term and long term solutions, and they came up with a plan of action that if they were members within this particular case, what would their plan of action be? Besides them reading the case study, they were encouraged to draw upon outside resources. There were clear guidelines as to what was to happen in their groups, when their case study analysis had to be completed, because at a particular time we were meeting together via Skype and we were going to discuss the case studies. That discussion, or the discussion that happened after the groups did their analysis, was very rich. This particular week, we were exploring isms. So, this particular activity enhanced our discussion of the nature and function of classism in schools and society, and their development of realistic solutions to classism in schools. So even though the activity was complex, it was complex for a reason. There was collaboration in groups. There was consulting of outside resources. They were analyzing it together, basically drawing on the content that they learned in the course that particular week. And they were coming together to analyze across case studies and within case studies to see what those similarities were and what would be some realistic solutions if they had a voice in making a change. All right, our next one is engendering competence. So remember, this is all about creating an understanding that learners are effective in learning something they value. So this kind of requires the use of self-assessments or assessments that relate to students' backgrounds, authentic assessments that allow them to demonstrate mastery in diverse ways. So how do you do this in your classrooms? How do you encourage students to take ownership of their learning process? And how do you create space for students to assess their own learning? Okay, great. Scaffolding and breaking those assignments into smaller parts. Yes, I am an advocate for multiple assessments. Oh, my favorite exam question, being able to ask them to contribute to questions that will be on their exam. That's awesome. Peer reviews and breakout sessions. Okay. All right. So let's see what are some other ways in which we can do this in our courses to ensure that we are being culturally responsive and meeting the needs of our students. So here are some other suggestions: portfolios, journals. Instead of giving them a multiple choice test, actually asking them to create a simulation or complete a performance task. Because if a person can perform it, if they can do it, then they know it, right? Interviews, role plays, encouraging self assessment. I have a self assessment at the end of each of my modules because I want students to have an opportunity to see if they've mastered the information that was presented in that particular module. And if they have not mastered it, then they can then go back to that particular module and reread the section that they need to in order to gain competence with that particular learning outcome or objective for that. So that's important. So here's another example from my EDF 6615 course. And it was a mind map assignment. So instead of giving them a test on the African diaspora, I had the students to demonstrate their understanding of what we were talking about by creating a mind map. There were four things that I wanted them to make sure that their maps included. They could draw the map, they can use a computer or web based program to design the map. But they had to be sure to show or demonstrate that they had a solid understanding of the unit. They were able to use images, words, quotes, and symbols. They had to show the connections between the different ideas that we explored in that particular module. And they had to demonstrate that this was a complex topic through their visual representation of their learning. We met up after this assignment, and they each had 2 to 3 minutes to go over their mind maps to actually discuss what they learned. In my opinion, they created masterpieces. While all the mind maps look different, the students were able to visually communicate the key ideas and connections in complex ways. Because I really wasn't interested in rote memorization. I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in how they were making sense of what we were exploring because it was the foundation of the next unit of study. And a simple multiple choice test could not do that for me. So, this particular activity students liked, more so my artistic students. But it was something different from my students that were used to traditional ways of assessing their learning as well. And I found that this was an authentic and meaningful way to assess whether they understood something or not. It was an opportunity for me to ask questions if the visual map or the mind map didn't really convey what the idea was really about, and it allowed me to check in with those students who needed support in those areas. All right, so we're basically coming have come to an end, and I know we've covered a lot in terms of what culture responsive teaching is, etc. But it is hope that the wheels of your brain right now that they are turning, and that you are thinking of ways in which you can be more culture responsive in your courses. Some content may lend itself easier to this. However, it can be done within all disciplines. And if you want to brainstorm a bit on how it can be done in your particular discipline, some people find it more difficult to do it in math. However, I have a cool website that really does it for you, connecting some of those social justice issues to the different math concepts. So if you want to brainstorm a bit on how you can do this with your content, then just reach out to me. Right now, I want you to type in the chat. As a result of our time together today, what are you committed to doing to begin transforming your remote classes into spaces where all of your students are engaged and connected? It doesn't have to be two, three, four things. It could be one thing. I'm going to be intentional about forming relationships with my students, and then you come up with the strategies later. But I want to see what you're committed to, and so that you can hold yourself accountable to shifting your mindset in terms of how you engage your students. And I guarantee you this, your students would greatly appreciate the time and investment that you will make in connecting with them and engaging them in your remote learning classes. So, ready, set, go. I would love to see what you're putting in the chat. Oh, great. This is why I write the textbook. Awesome. I did that for the EDF 2085 course as well, where there was no textbook that really displayed or conveyed information from multiple perspectives. So, myself and a colleague, we wrote the textbook for that. All right. Using mind maps as a powerful way to identify misconceptions. Great. Use more visual responses in their discussion boards or in their assignments. Yes, awesome. More interactive discussions, encouraging interaction. And I know that FAU uses WebEx mainly. And I don't really know the features of WebEx, but with Zoom, I break my students up into groups within Zoom and I give them a question. It automatically breaks them off. I tell Zoom the number of people I want in each group, and I, as the instructor, can pop in and out of those groups. And then we come back together to discuss what happened in groups. So that's a way that's great. Doodle appointments to review assignments. Awesome. Oh, great. So WebEx can do the grouping as well. Okay. And D2L can do that as well. That's awesome. Yes, figuring out how we can engage and scaffold things for our students is very important. Yes, being more intentional, Lynn, about learning more about my students as well as providing students opportunities to voice their concerns. That's definitely important. The math website, Robert, is called Radical Math. And there's a link on that website that has a variety of social justice issues, and it ties it right into different math concepts. All right, Judy.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Kalisha. What a powerful session. And so the answer to that question is definitely we will be inviting Kalisha back to share more information or more in-depth information. Kalisha, this was amazing. We truly appreciate everyone's participation. This has been really, really a powerful session. And it's what each of you brings to the table that is what makes it so powerful, because every
Yes.
one of you are experts in an area, and we all deal with the same, the same student body. So being able to relate to them in such a great variety of ways is beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Walden. You will be back. I promise that.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Kalisha.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
everyone, for joining in today. We appreciate your interaction.